the conceptual notes under the framework of the budgeting of the program. For these 12 programs, which are included in the P&A, were conducted in the coastal area, in the healthcare sector, forestry, as well as agriculture. Our concept for the water sector has not yet been developed because there is a project that is ongoing, its development, and it's being subject to analysis now in Madagascar. This will be part of our next stage, developing the P&A. I want to thank those who have supported us in our project, in this publishing of our P&A in the regions of Madagascar where it's being applied, the southern region. In the north of Madagascar, it is also foreseen to have a 5-year review, periodic review of the P&A, and given the new vulnerability analysis to be able to include them, and when there is an evolution on international negotiation on climate, and when the national circumstances demand the information collected, which helps produce reports every 6 months, yearly reports, and will be delivered according to the capacities of those who the reports are addressed to, and also there will be a schedule for the production of results, which will be defined so that the information and the data helps feed the publishing or the review of public policies. So thank you very much ladies and gentlemen, from Madagascar. Thank you very much. And now I will invite the representative of Niger, Mr. Sahad. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Ladies and gentlemen, hello. I'm from Niger, and in Niger I work in an institution we call the National Council for Sustainable Development. Our main focus of the 3 conventions we have, and which are also the designated authority for the Climate Green Fund, the Green Climate Fund, as well as the Adaptation Fund. So now I am very quickly try to provide with you a short presentation about our P&A, our National Adaptation Plan, which is a logical follow-up to the National Adaptation Action Plan drafted in 2006, which in turn is an urgency program. So since the beginning of the P&As, Niger has always been supported together with the Green Climate Fund in drafting its P&A, and it was sent to be able to continue, and the last version was published in November 2022. So now we're going to see how we were able to provide an objective view of the PNA with the main climate risks in Niger, the main priorities of adaptation and their costs, the strategy and the startup of the PNA, the mobilization of resources to be able to start up the PNA, and then the following stages that we need to take into account. First of all, we need to know at a vision level that in Niger, all the plans that may exist or can be drafted, every program and every policy is aligned to a core strategy that we call the Sustainable Development Strategy and Inclusive Development Strategy, which has a horizon at 2035. So that alignment with all the plans, including the PNA, what we try to do, we want to do. And as you can see here, we have a socioeconomic, adequate socioeconomic development ensured by the startup of a resilient society to climate and covering the climate risk to communities, the ecosystems, and integrating the adaptation to climate change in the developing socioeconomic sectors and also the national. When this part of the vision is very important for us because in terms of planning and adaptation, and then we need to work with the districts locally so that the integration of the climate change and climate resilience dimension is included in the field at a local level, and we need to keep into account or keep in mind the climate change also. So as a specific objective in our national adaptation plan, we believe that we wanted to contribute to the sustainable development of the country to reduce the impact when facing climate change. In Niger, three-quarters of Niger is a desert. We are part of the Sahara. We're impacted by very many phenomena that we're going to see now. And as specific objectives, we want to reduce the vulnerability of the populations and the ecosystems when facing the climate change. And the drafting of this national adaptation plan, there is a study of vulnerability carried out in the sectors where we began working in the PNA. And this study is which took us to build proposals and see the priorities by sector. And the specific objective is also to facilitate the integration of the adaptation to climate change in the policies, programs, and projects for development. Niger is well adapted because we, as an institution, have supported many different sectors in their integration to climate change resilience in their strategies. We can talk about healthcare, agriculture, transportation, and other, and this was already done in Niger. Now, what are the main climate risks that take us to establish this national adaptation plan? We can cite one of the main areas are floodings, droughts, extreme temperatures, the sand storms, violent winds, enemies of the cultures or of the crops, and it is totally logical when we have infrastructures that are not really adapted. Therefore, we have land which are constantly degrading, an amount of rainfall where even its minimum rainfall will cause great flooding. And these are the main climate risks with which we live every day in Niger. Now, which are the adaptation priorities that were developed in our PNA and which are their costs? We need to understand that our PNA we need to understand three main focal points on this. In this axis, where the P&A is sent to the convention and it's okay, and then you're going to see in this presentation the detail of this table that we're showing you to take the core priorities of the axis and the strategic priorities, as well as the different sector action programs. At a level of access or core issues is to reinforce the coordination between institutions and keep in mind climate change adaptations in the policies and in the national policies and programs with 0.901 billion African francs. The second axis is the startup of a priority action plan with agriculture, cattle, transportation, forests, wetlands, and public health. So in this second focal point has about so that would be 3.8 trillion African francs. Now we also have a financing of from the fund for less developed countries. So we are going to draft a specific P&A for the water sector, and it will be ready this year of the water sector. And we hope this water sector P&A and the P&A that includes all the other sectors will be able to be grouped to build an overall P&A. So this is financing, and the total is raised to close to 4 trillion African francs. And we talk about money and how we mobilize these funds. And the starting up of these adaptation plans, the three main focal points or axes, we have 11 actions divided in 56 specific activities that build up the startup, and we want this to be supported on the National Action Plan strategy in matters of climate change that was drafted in 2003 and reviewed in 2014, which is the federating document on the matter of sustainable development and of inclusive growth aimed at 2035, which is a federal and essential document for all the national strategies in Niger. Now, starting up our P&A, we have a table to summarize the different axes or focusing points and the priorities where it is aimed at. So we can see that at a level of each priority and each sector, there are activities that are going to be developed. So the startup of the program, or the beginning of the program, we have drafted a 5-year plan, 2023, 2027, and all the activities are divided, and they don't start all of them on the first year, but all will cover the 5 years since the first startup of the program, and will occur during the next 5 years. And this is what's summarized in this table. Now, mobilization of resources. How do we manage to mobilize those resources to start up our P&A? We have mechanisms that were already established We have the commissions of financial resources mobilization, what we call the National FEM Committee. We have the National Appointed Authority, which has ensured the drafting of our P&A. We have the partners, which are the UNDP and all the other international agencies. Also, we have a consultation of the main players that intervene in adaptation, and we have conducted more than 10 encounters or meetings since when we started evaluating our P&A, and we got together in each region of the countries to be able to share the experience at the adaptation level and capitalize on these resources to be able to scale the experiences that improved our situation. So how do we mobilize the resources to start the P&A? We can see that in the summary we can see 3.8 trillion of African francs, which are $546 million that were necessary to start up this P&A. And I want to remind you that it was drafted so it can be on average in midterm and long term. So which are the main the national budget? The government needs to contribute and has to provide the example, and through that we have the different cooperations, bilateral, multilateral, the foundations, and the different development associations, and the civil society, and also the funds such as the green climate funds and adaptation funds, etc.
So, what are the next stages? We are disseminating our NAP. And to start, we need to take into account all the information and all the awareness to members of parliament, to the media, to civil society, and around other institutions that are present in Niger, all councils and organizations as well. Therefore, the dissemination continues. However, we have an optic as a state to have a roundtable with the financial organizations and the organizations who are involved in the NAP. These are the lighthouse stages that we are going to set in motion. And these are the stages for our NAP. As an adaptation part, we should say that in my country we have many of these giraffes. We love them. For us, they are important. We consider them when thinking about climate change. So we need to favor adaptation for them because they are living beings such as ourselves. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation, especially that part of the giraffes. I wanted to take a few minutes to see if there are any questions regarding the first presentation, any comments or reflections or remarks regarding the presentations that just ended. Okay. If there's no questions, we can add them to the Q&A at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much both presenters. Again, my name is Arthur R.M. Becker. I work for the Environmental Protection Agency of Liberia, and I'm from Liberia. I listened to the thank you so much for the initiative in Madagascar and that of Niger in terms of developing your NAP. Just a couple of questions that cut across for both of you. One is specifically to the colleague from Niger. To both of you, what are a few of the key lessons learned in the development of your NAP that you will care to share with us? And if there were also sharp challenges that stuck out in terms of the development of your NAP that you will also care to share. For both of you as well, do you envisage through the implementation phase of your NAP to be able to implement through separate sectorial plans, or rather would you do you envisage implementing through a collaborative sectorial approach? Additionally, to two of you, is there an alignment of your NAP to your nationally determined contributions? And to my colleague from Niger, I saw that you costed your NAP, which is quite useful and information to provide to us in terms of the priority strategies. What was the yardstick used in costing your NAPs in terms of the sectoral priorities? And you also highlighted the interventions, because normally there are conditional and unconditional phases in terms of driving these processes. National governments have their own responsibilities, and national governments also look forward to the donor community for support in financing these mechanisms. Is there an implementation plan both of you have drafted to drive this process to its logical conclusion? And lastly, for the both countries, is there a climate financing reporting mechanism or system in place to ensure that the NAPs that you've both developed address the climate-sensitive priorities of the country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. These were plusieurs questions, donc je vais passer peut-être les...
I want to thank these different questions that are extremely important, and I'm going to try to answer them. Lessons learned regarding that, as I said before, in Niger, we started from a logical point of view with a national adaptation plan that was elaborated in 2006, and all adaptation projects are startup projects from that program. And that program was an urgent program. We were not able to elaborate another adaptation plan up to the NAP. And even though it's an urgency plan, it implies many projects that were developed and that have already showed their results. Starting from that point, before starting with the NAP elaboration, we said to ourselves, we need to take some lessons learned from this. That's logical. And what are those lessons? The studies were carried out as vulnerability studies in different key sectors, especially in agriculture and livestock and the forestry world. And regarding this, I said this on the fly, but culture and breeding have contributed so much to these sectors. They contribute 40% of our GDP. So we are going to have a serious study for the different sectors, and we should propose adequate measures. And this is why we have focused on agriculture and livestock. This means options regarding content for our NAP. Now, the question that was asked about the alignment of the NAPs, it's also logical because the CNAs are commitments that each country assumes, and commitments that are going to be validated and that are going to become material through the CNMs. But besides this, we have our NAP on the side. These are documents that work together and they contribute to reinforce resiliency of the population in Niger and also of the ecosystems. We feel very proud to be able to say this because it's within our hearts and we always feel this. The state needs to take the first step before asking anything to the partners. And this is what we are trying to do today in Niger. I thank your question. Thank you so much for giving us some time for answer some questions regarding the lessons learned and the other questions that follow up. Well, for Madagascar, for lessons learned, the drafting of Madagascar's NAP are sectorial. There is a consultancy on the 23 regions of the country, and this consultation in different sectors within ministries, national, implies a work of all sectors that enter the climate change adaptation field for Madagascar. Documents are always drafted as references. Therefore, for Madagascar, the CDN is a reference, and this is why our NAP document was drafted according to the national plan regarding the action points. It's an action political plan for Madagascar. And actually, Madagascar's project, we have done the P&A to review the cost of this startup plan that will allow us to assess and reassess the costs that this program will have in terms of structures to be able to set this in motion. This is what this is about. Thank you. Thank you for your answers. We are now going to go to our third presentation. Gertie Pierre is now going to take the floor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gertie Pierre, Director of the Climate Change Institute in Haiti for the Ministry of Environment, the Green Fund, and the Adaptation. For me, today is a great pleasure to be here and be here with our delegation and proudly present our National Adaptation Plan for Climate Change. We need to say that this National Adaptation Plan was drafted with particular reasons in Haiti, especially with the social, economic, and political problems that we have had in the last period of time, which has allowed us, starting with the team in charge of drafting the National Adaptation Plan. You know this, Haiti is a very vulnerable country regarding the terrible effects of climate change. We are not released of this just because we're a small country. We are on water, We are subject to floodings, to water increase, to droughts, temperature rises, which justifies currently these documents. Which has allowed us today to draft a plan, this adaptation plan for climate change. Let's see. It's just to say that in Haiti, the sectors that our NAP took into consideration is agriculture, water resources, health and infrastructure. Coast infrastructures, because Haiti is a mainly coastal country. Therefore, we need to take into account all the coast sectors.
Our process for drafting the National Adaptation Plan of Haiti was something we did firstly thinking about, like our colleague said, to keep in mind the extent that we began with our National Adaptation Plan, which we drafted strategic documents such as CDE, the climate change policy, identify the impacts of vulnerability to climate change, and we've also carried out several workshops for consulting from the department point of view as well as local point of view, which allowed us to identify the options for adaptations which were foreseen in the different sectors in Haiti. And also, we have carried out validation workshops with the key points of the sectors which were considered for the version of these documents. The review of the documents with the players, our P&A, is a participational and inclusive, which has allowed us to generate exchange with all other partners, other sectors, to be able to generate a document for all the population in the National Adaptation Plan of Haiti. Therefore, the view of our P&A, as you already know, we want to create a resilient country. This is a resilient country which may face climate change and where we can reinforce the adaptation capacities of all the districts, and adaptation taken into multiple dimensions fed by solid data at the core of the planning and materialization of the national development. The goals or objectives as any P&A, our goals are to increase the climate resiliency in the priority sectors of our P&A, and also to have the help of programs and projects which are gender sensitive as well as overarching, reinforcing human assets for planning, and the startup of follow-up and evaluation, improve the legal framework in adaptation of priority socioeconomic sectors, and formulate adaptation plans for climate change. And this is why it's important to conduct local activities, because in Haiti, for us, adaptation must begin at a local level. Now, the priority actions that were defined, we conducted a work where the methodology was to use multi-criteria to define by department and define which are the priority actions. But beginning with these priority actions, we were able to define or identify 341 actions at a country level, but 21 of these were taken and included as priority actions, and we say that through analysis that were conducted with the different stakeholders of these main actions included in the National Adaptation Plan. You can see here, this is by department, and then the four priority sectors. We have, for example, 89 actions on agriculture. In health, we have 85, infrastructure 85, in water 81, for a total of 340 priority actions. Now, which are the main criteria chosen for prioritization? Improve the income, improve the food availability, due to the situation of the country, because Haiti is a country which is mainly agricultural, to improve also the condition of women, which is one of the things that we discovered in our activity, is that the participation of women in the drafting and in the process of the PNA, which allowed us to say that we are performing a gigantic work in Haiti where women take part regularly in their activities when related to climate change and the environment. Also, improvement of the well-being of the population, or in other words, we talk about creating employment, reinforcing the environment protection, and also changes in behavior and improvement in communities. Now, these are the adaptation priorities that come from the PNA by department, and the priority actions that were defined, and the goals for to be able to see these adaptations action, and the indicators that we keep in mind or that we monitor. This related to, we did it for each one of the departments of Haiti or districts. So we had north, south, southeast, Nipez, and we repeated the same actions to be able to visualize the similarities and see the adaptation priorities that were included in the program. As you can see in Haiti, the problems are repeated in each one of the areas or departments or districts. It is very vulnerable to climate change, and the actions were very similar with the different departments. There are small actions that were specific to a specific department, but globally at a country level, their priorities were very similar. So, regarding the startup strategy, we drafted with our PNA a strategy for financing, and this is through the financing strategy where we could define that to run adaptation in Haiti, we're going to need $980 million from 2022 to 2030. That would be $110 million per annum if we want to do something from now until 2030. Only for the agricultural sector, the inaction cost would be $170 million per annum. So it's important to work and have adaptations. So it's going to be a lot more expensive if we don't work, or if we don't start working on this action plan. Also, we need to think that Haiti, we don't really have a budget at an internal level that can keep in that can cover these costs. So we face different ways of financing the national budget and conduct investments from the private sector, so we need to encourage a private sector that needs to keep in mind the adaptation actions in their multiple activities and find financial multinational mechanisms like GCF, AF, or the FPMA Adaptation Fund. Another strategy for starting it up has to do with the measures we want to take and ensure the CNCC, or Climate Change National Committee, which was officially launched this year in December, and what allowed us that at a national level, keeping in mind climate change and the climate change problem is addressed at the highest level of government, because our CNCC is a committee that is directed by the Prime Minister in Haiti, and then the appropriation of all the ministries that are part of the committee reinforce the capacity of the national appointed authority, which is the Ministry of the Environment for the Green Fund and Adaptation Fund. Also draft district plans for adaptation. This is a very important chapter for us, because we can't talk about adaptation and leave aside the local level. Also, we need to keep in mind the different communal plans for development that were developed and that are under review to integrate the adaptation to these communal plans. Startup of follow-up systems for financial flows to adapt for climate change, and this will facilitate the reports and the management of the climate action costs in the country. And also to conduct an evaluation follow-up coordinated by CNCC to avoid duplication at a national level, and also for public policies and the ODDs and establishing protocols between the different areas involved. This is the roadmap of the startup. Everything that we have said is available in this roadmap that was drafted for the startup, and also we drafted new policies for the startup of the National Adaptation Plan. And as a conclusion for Haiti, adapt and constitute the strategy of the priority response to climate change. The adaptation needs human and financial resources that are adequate, and also efficacy in institutional arrangements, and also we need synergy with other partners for the startup of the PNA, and a follow-up of evaluation, which is a fundamental component for the adaptation process to climate change, as well as the reinforcement of capacities, which is something that cannot be avoided within the PNA process. With this, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madame Castiglione. We're going to begin the last presentation, and we are going to introduce the Ecuador NAP, and we will leave.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to present the National Adaptation Plan of Ecuador. I'm Karina Barrera, the Undersecretary of Climate Change of the Minister of Environment, Water, and Ecological Transition. Our presentation is very short, so I will share with you some context of Ecuador. Ecuador is one of the first countries in the world to include the nature rights in the Constitution and the good living. The good living is a philosophy that includes the equilibrium between human being and social and environment. How to find this equilibrium? That's why the mitigation and the adaptation is part of our constitution. And then we have set it, sorry, I have the power. We have set it a national adaptation plan with this approach, including with a vision that this document could be part of our public policy, not just a document, isolated document. We want that it be part of our national policy. And it makes a different approach. In the past, we have been working on projects, adaptation projects, but now we want to focus adaptation like the public policy that guides the different actions of the ministers and the territories. In the sense, it's necessary to say, how do you put on this place? Okay. Okay. We work in 6 sectors. I just like to say that Ecuador is one of the most mega biodiverse of the world per square kilometer. That's why how to focus adaptation in natural heritage is part of our challenges. We choose 6 sectors in order to have the different information: natural heritage, water security, fisher, agriculture, and productive and strategic sectors. We try to understand how the climate change is impacting of each one of these sectors. And it requires to identify 4 threats, the main threats, that is related to heavy rainfall, frost, drought, and high temperature. We work with this kind of hazards, and then I think that one innovation in our national adaptation plan is to include a climate sectorial risk assessment, but we develop specific models trying to evaluate the biophysics impact. As part of the 6th adaptation report of the IPCC, we included this recommendation, and we introduced new models for each sector. That's why we work with the health sector. For example, we related the speed of propagation of dengue with the increase of the temperature. And now we know what are the main places, and it depends on the typical years, because it's not a prediction, as you know. We have to identify what are the possible pathways or the possible scenarios to the risk, for these risks. And we have now these scenarios for the health sector. We have the scenarios for specific models for the hydric sector too, the water insecurity. We know, we model the 35% of the territory, including what is happening with the scarcity or what is of water, and the hydric balance too. We include in this information and how is related with deforestation, for example. Then we work with the agriculture sector, modeling what is going to happen with the main products that are related to the GDP in Ecuador, and what is going to be the productivity of these main crops related to the use of land now. And then we have specific models for the settlement, human settlement too. We model what is happening in 7 cities, and we related the vulnerability of the infrastructure with floodings and landslide too. And now we have more information to be included in the territorial planification. And then with the productive sector, we choose the oil petroleum infrastructure and the hydro generation power, the hydropowering too, because we depend on the water for the energy supply. And that's why we model this kind of sectors, and we include and we know what are the most vulnerable parts of these productive sectors. And we model the transport sector too, and it was very important to have information. That's why we know now, after 3 years, we spent 3 million that comes from the GCF to have this information. But we consider that it's the very starting point to the future. But now we have more information to make decisions. And then I think that we have some specific challenges now because the legal framework in Ecuador says that we have to develop an adaptation national plan for 4 years. But we recognize that transformational adaptation needs a long-term strategy. And this information, it's not for 4 years. This should be included in the long-term strategy. We are working now with the decarbonization plan, but we want to include a new chapter related to resilience. And this is the way that the countries like Ecuador, as is a vulnerable country, needs to include not just mitigation, but adaptation as part of a long-term strategy. What is happening with the resources? As I mentioned before, we spent the $3 million of the GCF just setting this plan, but now we have to deploy this plan with the different sectors. It means to work with not just with the ministers, we have to include this information in the policies of the Minister of Health, the Minister of Agriculture, and each one. And then we have to deploy to the vertical, to the ground, to the subnational governments in order to prioritize which investments are necessary in the territories in order to adapt to the future climate risks. It means for us to have a roadmap. This is the next steps for Ecuador. Now with this information, we are going to cross all of the sectorial information. We understand that the territories are not managed by a sectorial vision. So we have to put everything together in order to prioritize which territories in Ecuador needs to invest more money. The scarcity of resources need to focus the future investments. That's why we are doing this exercise. Then we are going to identify what investments are being doing by the international cooperation, by the local resources, and the development banks in order to identify which are the necessities of funds and to align the different resources in the same direction. Because this is the problem. We have a project approach, the resources are dispersed. So it's important to have a huge alignment, one alignment, and then to focus all of the cooperation in the right place, not to be guided by the cooperation, the liberal partners. We have to put the rules now. And then we recognize that these different steps require more time and require more resources. That's why it's important to promote for the GCF the next investments, the next, I think that they have new windows in order to have more finance to complete the national adaptation plans. And we recognize, as I said before, this is the first part. We need more time to make a specific projects pipeline, but this project should be aligned to the national adaptation policy. I can read all the steps, but I have to, I try to summarize what is needed for Ecuador in the next steps. And then I should say that there are different approaches about how to work of this. I have learned about what you have been doing, trying to work with since the different plans to collect and put in one plan. Ecuador starts in a different way, but I think that everything is good. It depends on what works for each one. It has been very useful for us to understand what is happening in the world and presenting what Ecuador is doing. Maybe it could be a good example for everybody. And then I'd like to present a short video of what we do with the formulation with the National Adaptation Plan. Thanks. Sorry, I have one slide more. It's very important to say. We develop national system of information that collect all of this information, the climate projections and ocean projections for 2050 and 2070. And we have all this information available for everybody. If you want, you can access to SPRAC. This is our system, and we included the geographic information, and we put in this system the different projects that are being developing in the country. So when we need the climate rational for the projects, this is available for the project developers. So this is, it was very important for us to join all of these tools, the policy and the tools. That is what we have. And now, if it's available, the video, thanks very much.
Nuestro país es altamente vulnerable a los efectos del cambio climático. Amenazas como sequías, heladas, altas temperaturas y lluvias extremas son cada vez más frecuentes y conllevan a potenciales impactos que afectan la disponibilidad del agua, alimentos, pérdida acelerada en la biodiversidad, propagación de enfermedades sensibles al clima y daño de los sistemas sociales, económicos y ambientales. Por ello, se construye el PNA, una política pública que proporciona insumos y herramientas para una adecuada gestión de la adaptación al cambio climático a escala nacional y local.
Estrategia de implementación y adaptación al cambio climático nos ha facilitado estos invernaderos que son para cultivos en ambiente controlado. La perspectiva es mejorar la calidad de vida, pero también conservando el espacio de la cuenca hidrográfica, conservando las fuentes de agua, comulgando la conservación de las fuentes hídricas con la producción agroecológica. Es un ganar comunal, un ganar institucional y un buen vivir para todos.
Este es un primer paso. El diseño de medidas, financiamiento e implementación es el otro gran reto que nos lleva a seguir trabajando en conjunto por un bien común. Ecuador es un país que ya se adapta al cambio climático.
Q&As to any of our presenters. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
I have a question for everyone. Regarding your own countries, I think that behind this presentation there are many projects that are the objectives of the financing. My question is to know why are we having these new NAP generations that are long-term. What Mr. Benitez said is that the projects are financed, these are three-year projects, 2-year projects, 3.5 years for 3-year findings. We know that adaptation is a long-term process. So in order to see the results, we need to be involved many years. Like countries, like for example Haiti, we need many years of installation. So we need to have short-term with small financing projects which will allow to reach the ambition that their country has set for themselves. Thank you so much for your question. Actually, for Madagascar, that is what is essential right now. To reach a project, because for us, projects that are placed in scale, we have two large-scale projects. The comprehensive model of resiliency in the agricultural sector, which is a sector that has a special scale, and we have the adaptation projects based on our ecosystems in the coast areas for Madagascar. Thank you for your question. I want to say that we share the same questions. This is why my presentation I said, while states are doing, while states do not make an effort for adaptation, which is according, we are always going to be running behind. We're always going to be asking, they're always going to give us a little bit, because when we developed our national adaptation plan with different experts, we had 7 options, and out of those 7 options, there were 12 projects that were proposed, where these two were searching for financing. So projects of 2 years, 3 years, this remains on the hands of impact validation. We have the same questions. These reflections need to continue. What has to be done to actually set this? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your question. Again, I just wanted to add, because my colleagues just said, adaptation is a long-term plan, and we are working our basis on a local level. Therefore, as you can see in our NAP, we have defined not one, in one first step, 110 million in investment, and to be able to adapt, we need to invest. And in countries such as Haiti, that does not have many internal resources to carry out these kinds of bankable projects, we need to call on multilateral international funds and invest more in our projects. This is why sometimes we ask our finance partners like the Green Fund of reviewing their policies, because they are very tight in developing countries to reach those goals. But another important point that we can already see on a national level is to to integrate this on a national budget, to include finance resources in order to adapt. And I'm not alone here. We have other colleagues of our country. If you want to add anything, please do so.
It's important for us, in the case of Ecuador, we have the long-term view, and we recognize that it's necessary a transition process, because the very starting point is to have information, and we have part of this information. In the case of developing countries, the scarcity of resources need a specific decision to make decision. The decision makers should be included, but not just the Minister of Environment. In the case of Ministers of Finance, are very important to be involved. But the only way to be involved is to transfer this technical information in economical information. If the countries understand what is the impact, or what could be the future impact in terms of growth, for example, we can convince everybody to prioritize this kind of investments and to have a public policy and to change, as I mentioned before, it's important to change the way to see this. If we continue seeing this process like many projects promoted by the cooperation, but not for an only policy, the resources are not going to be enough. The resources are dispersed. That's why it's necessary to have a country-driven pipeline, project pipeline. It's very important, but it could be part of a national policy, adaptation national policy, that should be part of an integral point of view, including ministers of finance, ministers of planification, and all of the institutions have to be working together with the same vision. I think that is the main challenges.
Merci beaucoup. Donc, ça devient, je pense, encore de plus en plus.
Thank you so much. So it's not just financing for the startup of diversity and for progressing in adaptation. It's now 12:35. I don't want to take too long of your lunch, but I see a couple of questions here. And we had a microphone in the room. We had another microphone here. Thank you to all those speakers. Thank you for sharing your experience. I had a question directed to Lek and maybe another contribution from another presentation. I think each one of you presented on the level of your national strategy to mobilize financing, internal resources and external, but you haven't provided much detail on how or how you're going to obtain the financing and how are you planning on mobilizing these internal financing mechanisms. And my second point that I wanted to mention regarding your budget planification. At any point, do I see, I think that you didn't mention in the global budget, this is the part that is going to be coming from the national budget, and this will come from external financing. I think that would be very positive to share, at least for those who are going to support us, that at least your government is willing to grab a percentage of your global funds for financing this. And another point that they didn't see, because the technical detail of the NAB, we also address climate and non-climate factors, because non-climate factors, let's not forget, they contribute to reinforce vulnerability of ecosystems and populations. And these non-climate factors should have an option maybe for development. But how are these costs going to be associated, these costs that are related and they are connected to climate factors? And another important point that I wanted to mention has to do with vision, because I have a serious problem, and maybe glasses can fix that, but are we talking about vision or long term, or are we talking about 15 years? Long term on 15 years or 10 years? Is it really long term when we are planning regarding climate issues? Is that enough for developing and planning? I think we should work on harmony in each country, because what I can see is that each country is connected according to their macroeconomic plan. For example, in Senegal, we have visions up to 2035, and now every document regarding climate are aligned to that vision that we have as a country. It's an obligation. That's a question for is it an obligation to have a vision regarding climate change? Is this aligned to the plan, to the macroeconomic plans, or is it in function to the situation? Or in relation to the vision that each country has? And the last point I really liked what Haiti showed regarding the cost of inaction. And I think every country should also integrate this in their NAP to take the cost of the losses and damages expected if nothing is done in each sector. I think this provides clarity for those who for decision makers, because if they don't do anything, for example, on what was planned, if we don't do anything, this is what the country will look like. This is what the GDP will look like by the impact that this is going to have on the economy. So it's important that every country should take this into account. I'll stop here. I had more comments, but I think that's enough for now. Thank you so much, and thank you for the comments. So if you would like to comment, if you care to answer some of the questions, and then one of our colleagues to comment. For me personally, I cannot comment directly on this because these are questions related to budget. They are given on a yearly basis to finance these projects. It's the government that is going to pay the 5% to reach these projects. So I'm not an economist, but I can say that.
Some information of Ecuador. In the case of Ecuador, since 2016 to 2020, we mobilized $2,000 million on climate change finance, but just 12% goes to adaptation process. And then the sources of this finance comes from debt. The 76% comes from debt. And how to finance adaptation? Now, the way to finance adaptation is with debt. This is the reality. So what is going to happen in the future? It means that we have to establish a roadmap. We know that it's important to have more resources from the fiscal sector, but as you said before, if the cost of non-action is recognized. And then, but it's not enough because the requirements are too high. And more, I think that grants maybe are not enough for everybody. And so maybe it is not the only source, but we have to be very intelligent in order to have blended finance and to include another modalities. But it's difficult if we separate mitigation of adaptation, and maybe we can use different mechanisms that integrate mitigation and adaptation, but with a specific focus on adaptation to solve the adaptation needs.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Senegal for us in Haiti. Being able to control international financing, we create a finance flow. Therefore, we create what we have this year will allow us to have mobilized budget from different multilateral partners. So once we take into account how much the country could have mobilized in this way, I can say that we are working right now on a consultation with different ministries that are going to finance, to integrate in the final budget this chapter on climate change. And at the same time, while we mobilize intentional funds so that the country has its commitment in climate change and integrate this in the national budget, a specific line for climate change. Thank you so much, and I'm going to turn to the president of LEG so that he can provide further information regarding the questions on the vision level and organization on a country level.
but I'll try to answer, of course, to reflect on the question he asked. I think it's the very first thing we should know that when it comes to NAP, it's a national review process. So it has to be the country that set the context. And then it also has to be the country that has to do what's the assessment and identification of your sector. So the issue of, for example, the vision, having a kind of a common vision, I think is very complicated, owing to the different priorities of countries. The only thing maybe from a leg side we could try to encourage countries when it comes to implementation of your programs or your projects. Wherein, for example, if you observe that there are commonalities between of course, your neighbors, then you could come together to implement regional projects. But for the vision itself, I think it also, for example, deals with the national context. So that's why for the leg, what we do in order, because you made mention of also financing, what we do is to create a space in wherein countries can know what are the critical elements that forms your NAP, at least so that you can have a very good NAP that can stand the test of time. And we should also know that the NAP is an iterative process. Even when it comes to funding itself, create space wherein at least you could have to understand the funding windows that are available, at least to discuss some of those challenges, and then also to learn from others. Like today we've heard from some countries, I think even over the past days, some of them are trying to integrate their national adaptation plan into their budgetary system. Some of them are having a very strong institutional arrangement. So a way forward going is that like most of these good experiences that have been shared, I think it's worth noting when you get back, these are things we can try to forge ahead. So from the leg side, just like creating the space, and now we have guidelines, supplementary guidelines are also available to help countries. Just like for the resources itself that you made mention from, it's very complicated. That's why for us, what we are looking forward to, even when they were presenting, I wanted to ask was, sometimes you see countries have suite of sectors, and then they already identify programs to implement them. But when it comes to actions, some of their actions in the form of project do not speak to the problems or hazards they've identified. Example, you will check into some of those NAPs, they've already identified health as maybe one of their critical challenges that's vulnerable, but when it comes to implementation, it's very difficult to see how it happens on the ground, just like other cross-cutting issues like technology and even the gender itself. So thank you. I'll stop for now. I don't know my colleagues, if you want to add. Ken and others? Okay, they're fine. Okay. Hope you are okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the input. Maybe I'll take one more quick question. I know there was a question back there. Oh. Do you have another one for the question? Oh, he's gone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me thank all the presenters for their sharing the experience about the NAP formulation and the implementation. I've got 3 questions. One is that we know sometimes the priorities, national priorities, might not reflect the NAP findings. Therefore, I want to get experience from you. How does the NAP priorities were reflecting the practice on the ground, especially on the project which are being implemented? That is one. The second is that...
Sorry, Mr. Maybe we'll start with one, and we'll get some answers, and maybe I will encourage you all, if you want to have some time for lunch, I would encourage you to meet the presenters maybe during lunchtime to continue the conversation. Okay, so let's start with the first one and get a few answers on this question first. Oh, the mic.
In the case of Ecuador, having these new tools, the data, it's important for us to use this information and to use the climate risk. And now with this, we can combine all of the climate risk of the different sectors and prioritize which are the territories that have been prioritized. And then I think that this is the starting point. We have to include maybe another kind of factors with the time. For example, the disasters risk, for example, and another non-climate factors that could be part of this process of prioritize?
Yeah, pour nous autres en Haïti, maintaining of les documents
For us in Haiti, the documents that were elaborated in our CDM, in the adaptation systems, once they are defined and once they've seen that the CNDI has placed a position in adaptation matters, we can see through the implementation what are the most vulnerable sectors. So from there, if we take into account that we are an essentially agricultural country, we can take into account the agricultural sectors. Another thing that we were able to determine is that some sectors in Haiti these last few years have been affected by climate change. They have been affected. So we have decided to study the vulnerability of one of the priority sectors in our countries. And the other priority sector is health. In Haiti, we haven't really studied this sector. This is why this sector has been considered in the NAP. In Niger, in the first place, what we have decided according to our sectors, what are the sectors that we consider to be addressed or that should be the study object. There are key sectors. We have identified some sectors. And we have in each sector or in some sectors the identification of different options, and for all sectors that are in here we have 37 options. So we have a selection through a selection matrix with different criteria, and we reduce them to 25 spread through the different sectors. And given that our NAP is inclusive and participative, we do validation workshops in the different elections that have been chosen. In all parts, everyone's invited so that each one can provide their contribution so that the selection or prioritization be national and the options that were retained and selected as priority on how this project was assessed.
For Madagascar, actually, the prioritization criteria are regarding the studies conducted and delivered and projected or forecasted by for example, the Meteorological Bureau. We have conducted agricultural studies regarding the data obtained or based on the data obtained by the DGM, and there is a study. Well, how can I say this? There is a national consultation that has been made in all the sectors which are implicated in this sector, and based on that information, we decided what's a priority, and based on the national climate change situation, and this will be followed up with the start of the PNA from this minute. Thank you very much.
Almost one. So thank you all for participating. Thank you all for staying, even if we are a bit late. Thank you to all our presenters. I would encourage you to connect with each other if you see opportunities in partnership, if you see opportunities to provide support. So please connect with each other. I would also encourage all developing countries, most especially the LDCs, to submit their national adaptation plans and outputs related to the NAPs to UNFCCC. And DELEG, of course, is always ready and available to support the LDCs on the formulation and implementation of the NAPs, and we're always available to discuss with you on direct country support, such as the Open NAP initiative and the NAP writing support. So again, thank you all for attending this session. Thank you to all our presenters, and enjoy your lunch.
Told myself to cut her loose, but baby now I'm wiser, it's no use. Now my eyes, 'cause I'm done with you. And if I would've known the things she do, I would've told myself to cut her loose. Baby now I'm wiser, it's no use. Now my eyes, 'cause I'm done with you. To cut her loose, but baby now I'm wiser, it's no use. Now my eyes, 'cause I'm done with you. If I would've known It ain't right, right, right. It ain't right, right, right. It ain't right. Oh no. You're calling my phone. I'm being patient, but I'm all alone. Staying faithful.
Moment where we will do the final wrap-up of the NAP Expo. I can see that we have considerably fallen in numbers. Maybe people are still enjoying the food outside. But nonetheless, the plan is that we will go through very quickly on the outcomes that we have captured so far. This is by no means meant to be a comprehensive summary of where we are, but just an indication of the kind of knowledge and information that we have shared so far, and make a very brief reflections on how do we see ourselves moving forward from where we are. And then from there, we will then do the closing, whereby we will have our government colleagues to come and say goodbye to everybody. We hope to finish by 3. This is the plan, but now we started 15 minutes late. I hope we still finish by 3, but let's try it. So I'm going to just do a quick presentations on the outcomes. If I can have the presentation on the screen. I will speak in English, and I apologize for people that may be using other languages. So in terms of the outcomes that we've gathered so far, part of what we are doing here as well, the NAP Expos, as we started right from the beginning, we mentioned that the NAP Expos, the purpose since 2013 is to incubate new ideas on how we can best continue to improve how we do adaptation. Obviously and clearly through the science, we know that we are not doing enough yet, and we need to keep on coming together to bring our brains together to see what we can do together to amplify adaptation action. The NAP Expo also provides us a space where we can create communities of practice, and many of them have been born through the NAP Expos, big and small. My colleagues from the NAP Global Network, if they are here, the conversations around the NAP Global Network as well initiated early on in the NAP Expos, and right now we're doing fantastic work. The NAP Expos also have provided a space for regional cooperation. There's a lot of work that has been inspired through the NAP Expos. And there have been joint publications. For instance, we are doing guidelines. We have supplements that also, so you saw some of them being launched here. The conversations in developing some of these supplements as well do happen within the purview of the NAP Expos as well. We want to carry this spirit forward. So we don't want this week or this day, the 4 days that we spent here, that it be the last time that we are doing what we are doing. What we intend to do is to see these conversations, to see the work that we've been doing for the last 4 days, continuing, and the collaborations that we've created now, the conversations you have had in the corridors amongst yourselves, we want to see those continuing beyond until you have implemented and continue to next year, and next year we pick on them again and we continue to them again. So this is the whole idea with the NAP Expos. And I like some of the messages that came through the presentations. For instance, there was a presentation yesterday on data, that no matter how much data and information you may have, if you don't convert that into a service, then it's as good as it can be. So what I'm trying to do here, I want us to convert the information we have captured over the 4 days into a service, into something that is going to benefit us as we move along. I had prepared some questions. Of course, we have prepared some questions. I'm going to go through quick reflections on each of the pathways in terms of what we have captured, what we want you to come up with, and I'm going to quiz at least 2 to 3 people or ideas on what are the planned actions to contribute towards scaling adaptation that you're going to do immediately from the expo, that are emanating from here. What things have you agreed with as countries or among others between organizations that you're going to do to continue from the NAP Expo here, things that you've already agreed? If we don't get inputs, I think we will leave late, but I'm hoping that we'll get inputs so that we can all get out of the room on time. So I'll just quiz 3 so that we can get ideas on what are you going to do immediately when we leave here. That's 1. 2, we would also appreciate if you can give us suggestions. Anybody come up with proposals. Having heard what we have said throughout the week, how do you think we can carry this forward in the most effective ways? We have had so many things, and we would like to see how we can carry those forward, and we need your support in doing so. So now I start and going first into the first pathway. In the first pathway, if you take our booklets, actually, we had it in the booklets where it was cutting across the themes we were looking at addressing multiple dimensions of climate risk. Dr. Burkett, actually, on the first day, we spoke about risk assessments in the LASI, and also the issues about risk analysis, risk assessment, multi-risk approaches. They are issues that cut across through the event. But then some of the things that came out very clear is that climate change is projected to convert existing risks into severe risks across the globe. And then effectively addressing multiple dimensions of risk requires strengthening coordination across all levels. I think the whole issue of coordination came across very strongly in multi-dimensions, whether it's vertically, it's horizontally, and even in issues that are to do with running the processes at a national level. The issue of coordination was emphasized quite a lot. And also through the human mobility discussions, actually preventing displacement is one of the actually very specific as well, through climate adaptation interventions and ensuring safe, regular, orderly migration in effective populations. Actually, this one brings across more specific issues now in terms of what we need to focus on to ensure that we do proper risk management and risk analysis. And NAPs also can be used to guide or facilitate planning for intersectoral issues, to cross-cutting issues, and ensure alignment in sectoral priorities. As we do our risk analysis, risk assessment for the NAPs, we can make sure that we do address or run our risk analysis in a way that consider these multiple dimensions of risk. Of course, there's ongoing work that's already going, for instance, by the LDC expert group, the colleagues convening this year, colleagues from the DRR, UNDRR, together with others, UNU as well, are also continuing to work on the comprehensive risk management approach or multidimensional risk assessment modeling to assist countries into effectively improving their risk analysis. And we also liked actually the examples that were shared by Chile on the climate risk atlas that have been using to inform their risk analysis of the country, but also, again, as a basis for the engagement of public and private stakeholders at the national level for their climate actions. So bearing in mind the two questions that we have said, in order for us to continue to improve on how we address the multiple dimensions of risk, what are some of the collaborations that you are going to continue to do as we leave this room? Which ones would you say we can do, or at least... So I'm going to open up the floor just for the three questions we made. I'm hoping we're getting around three. So may I kindly ask for roaming mics? Yeah, we can use this one. So anybody, any advice, any proposals, suggestions? I'm sure you don't imply that we stop doing risk management approach or towards addressing climate change. I'm sure that is what it does. The chair, you wanted to say something? It's okay, they like to say, yeah.
I often, when I see such a kind of picture, try to look on the flip side. What are the opportunities out there we do not tap in? There are plenty of risks, but plenty of opportunities, unlimited opportunities. And adaptation is to tap into opportunities, not always being doomed and bloomed by risk. So my suggestion would be to find a bullet somewhere. You put the opportunities to leverage adaptation in different contexts.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I think that's very helpful addition that we need to make on this one, on leveraging what are the existing opportunities. Do we have any other input? We are capturing this very carefully, and we are going to enrich our set of follow-up actions as we we live here and continue to go back to our routines. So thank you very much. Another one?
Thank you, Morsomi. Over this 4 days of NAP Expo here, and also the NAP Expo that I attended last year in Botswana, it's very enriching experience that all of us have felt. And we have so many countries implementing NAP, preparing NAP. Some have submitted their NAP documents, some are in the process of submitting the documents. There's so much knowledge generated. And the best part of the NAP has been it is very much left to the individual countries as to the specific way that they would like to prepare the NAP document. Of course, we have the overarching leg guidelines to guide us so that we are not lost. But when it comes to the flexibility, each individual country has the flexibility to do the NAP preparation in the way that best suits them. So my suggestion is, if we can capture these lessons, good practices that each of these countries have utilized, followed, that would be, I think, very beneficial and very much teaching for other countries also. And in some cases, for example, in the case of Bhutan, we have the local program supported by UNCDF, and side by side we were also preparing the NAP document. And then we could see a lot of synergies. In fact, in a lot of our capacity development programs, we took local officials also together with us, so that they would be able to share their experiences having worked with the local communities. We talk a lot about vertical integration and horizontal integration of climate change adaptation in NAP, but local would give us that solid, concrete examples having worked with the community. So these are some of the ways, and my suggestion would be, if we can, if UNFCCC could take a lead and then encourage us, all of us, to share short-based case studies, so that other countries who have just embarked on preparation of NAP can benefit from it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. And I think it still goes back into the issue of leveraging existing opportunities as well, building on the experience that we have. And I do believe, as we had here, as you mentioned, also Bhutan has experience, Chile also has good experience they shared. So we have to create those opportunities to share that experience. So I'm hoping, Chair, you're also taking note of that to see how we can build on the experience that was shared here, to use it as a resource that others can use, build from. There was a lot also on Pathway 2, looking at Pathway 2. We had a good conversations, cutting across since day one, the utility or the importance of data across the board. And I think yesterday, one of the important things that I captured is that data, when converted to use cases and services, provides a step towards value realization, which is what then we can be able to use it for proper decision making and be able to take actions. And there's a need to inspire technological innovation, disruption, and action in order for us to create the kinds of products that we need for the kind of challenges we are facing. The other element that came out very nicely and strongly is that Earth observations are foundational for the entire adaptation cycle, not only to understand the climate risks, but also to access funding, as was made the case that, for instance, the Green Climate Fund requires a solid climate science basis, that you need the Earth observations to articulate that. For implementation, you need your data. For monitoring and evaluation, there was a session yesterday actually that demonstrated how Earth observations can support monitoring and evaluation. Remote sensed information as well to complement areas or many of the challenges that we obviously know that we don't have enough surface data. There's a lot of ongoing work and initiatives as well here. The Adaptation Committee, for instance, has a stream of work where they are working with the private sector to see how you can sensitize and leverage interest from the private sector to support countries. And that also came in different dimensions. The LEG, for instance, is working with the LDCs and other partners on the NAP data initiative to assist countries to use available data that they can use to complement their existing data sets, to create packages that can easily feed into their work, even where they do not have data. Geo was important, instrumental in a lot of products and programs that are launching here in the Americas, but also in many parts of the world. In Africa, the GeoTlam, the Geo for NAPS project as well, that's targeting specifically Geo, and then the Latin American project that was presented on the Monday. The issues on private sector collaboration, there's so many examples actually that were showing how the private sector has been able to assist countries or actually governments in pulling up data that is essential to inform climate risk analysis. So I also want to pause here to see whether there are any also ideas that people are going to continue as we live here, or any other additional insights on how we can build on what we have captured through the NAP Expo as we move forward. I think it was the lunch. Okay. I think there's a request for the mic here.
Hi, I'm Laureano from Argentina. I'm going to talk in Spanish because I'm better in Spanish. I just
wanted to comment. Okay. I would like to comment regarding the need of information and having this information available. We know that it is very useful and that the decisions need to be based in evidence to be able to make the best decisions. However, there's something that wasn't commented that much in this NAP Expo that I believe it is important to point out for the following Expo, and also to take this home to work in each of the countries and continue sharing with other countries, which is what has to do with the knowledge we already have in the local and ancestral territories, that without even talking about ancestral, but we have local knowledge, and there are common problems that everybody has which don't have to do with adaptation or climate change. The climate change in some cases strengthens some problems, and there are many diagnoses made, at least where I come from, regarding certain problems that have to do with vulnerability, and that maybe the data is important, but there are things that are already known and we already know what to do. So I believe the challenge is to be able to carry out those initiatives that maybe, I don't know if I'm actually mentioning something that you will comment later, but how what you do for scaling up, and I believe there's no optimal answer mentioned here, and we should think about this. Data is important, but also all these, we should value all these other things that we already know. And my idea is not coming out of my head, but, well, that.
Actually, the LEC members were discussing about this in the morning, that the knowledge and the data, as we speak about them, the technologies, if you don't apply the right know-how, then they might not as well even be as much useful. So I think that element of bringing the local knowledge, the ancestral systems that we had before is very key also to these conversations. And thank you very much for raising that point. And I think one thing that I hear now in the conversations today, actually our ancestors were living in the future. We have gone backwards, and we need to go to the future that they were.
No, just a little thing.
Only one thing, and added to this that you say that I do agree fully, what I wanted to communicate is that it is useful to have the data, but there is information that we already have, and that we don't need to continue spending a lot of time generating more detailed information, but we know what we have to do. So now it's just move forward and start executing. It's something that happens a lot in climate change, is that we want to have very detailed information on several matters with a very precise diagnosis based on many indicators, and which is difficult information to get, and maybe we already know what to do. So just prioritize execution.
Thank you very much. I saw the team that is working on data of the leg actually nodding a lot. So I'm confident that they are taking this very well into account. So I will now go to the third pathway where we're talking about scaling up technical and financial support for the formulation and implementation of NAPs. Messages that came out very clearly here is that enhanced coordinated support across all actors to assist countries to create strong project pipelines and access funding to implement NAP priorities or adaptation priorities is crucial. This was the issue where we talked about not only engaging the governments, but also building the capacities across the board at the national levels, whether it becomes of the smallholder farmers or cooperatives that we have at the national levels, but to build the capacity across the board and make sure that everybody is involved and engaged. But also at the same time, I like the examples that were shared here in the Caribbean, because countries are smaller, then you can bring together programs or projects that can then you can create issues at scale that can then attract and be able to mobilize easily. The other issue was the innovative financing models are needed to accommodate the sheer scale of resources needed, working together with foundations, bringing other individuals. At the UNFCCC, we have the United Nations for NAPS initiative, which we are also running the UN for NAPS forum here. And we do appreciate sincerely the organizations that continue to work on this, because the idea here is that we work with the organizations where countries can express their needs, and then the organizations are able to respond. And there has been very interesting discussions around that to accelerate that. I will also pause here to see whether there is any inspiration on something that I should proactively go and tell our executive secretary about, so that he can instruct me to do immediately from Monday. So any of us for advice? I see a hand there. Yeah. Thanks, Lo.
Actually, it's a question, because you just explained what UN for NAPS is doing, and I think many agencies, we couldn't attend all the sessions. There's many parallel sessions ongoing that are super interesting. So will it be possible to have a recap of what was requested from the different countries, so we make sure we're not missing a request?
Yeah, my colleague Angela is going to respond to that very quickly if she gets a mic.
Thanks, Lou, for the question. And yes, we are making all the presentations available, and also happy to share a recap with the partners in the follow-up to this event. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Lou. Yeah. Yeah. And then I think here we also had the example actually that was shared on Monday on how 5Cs and also on Tuesday, or CSA, on how it is supporting Senegal and a lot of other African countries in actually solving some of these issues or challenges in accessing resources, or actually in getting deeper into the technical work on adaptation. So I think these are some of the great opportunities that we need to see how we can connect others to these kind of opportunities to leverage and build on and maybe accelerate their work. And another one actually is on the national and regional actors. For Chile, yesterday they had the full session on nature-based solutions, where there were a lot of national companies and national organizations that are actually leading and championing a lot of interesting work here in Chile. So there's a lot of opportunities, I think, that also we can build from. Then on the issue of scaling up adaptation through systems approach, also it was important to note that dimensions of risk require strengthening vertical and horizontal coordination across all levels, and also integrated approaches that consider sectors, or if you like, to call them in a way, because that's how economies are organized, that also consider different actors as well in that space. Different goals at the national level. What are the goals for development, and external as well? There are regional initiatives and frameworks that as countries we are part of. What are those goals that we are trying to pursue? And international as well. The SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and many others, and etc. And also the policy levers. What are the legal frameworks that would help us to get to where we want to go, including financing as well, and then the impact as well in terms of who are the beneficiaries, who are the communities. So integrative approaches that cut across all these boundaries and consider the systems as a whole would be have a greater impact in leading us towards effectively addressing this multiple dimension of climate risk or the climate change adaptation issue. There were examples, for instance, of the Great Green Wall on Africa, the Sahel, for example, the LDC expert group, they're working with several partners to develop the technical guidelines on integrative approaches. I don't know if there's any other addition here. I'll spare you for this one, and then I'll go to the next. I'm hoping to get more hands on this one. So there was the issue of scaling up technical and financial support for the formula. Oh, I went back? Oh, sorry. Scaling up adaptation in water resources. Back on this one.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
First of all, I apologize if what I mentioned is what's actually missing. We know that this space is very useful and it's very enriching, and that I appreciate a lot, and I thank for the space, but I am critical, and I'm critical with myself also. So I believe that we missed to work a little bit deeper in what was mentioned in the beginning, in the opening of the expo, which has to do with the transformational adaptation and with the consideration of poor adaptation and how this is related with mitigation actions. I believe that a challenge that we have, because we talk about the NAPs, the NAPs, but also we have long-term strategies and how. So when you think in transformational adaptation, you need to think in the long term, because the NAPs maybe have a shorter term, but it's not the one that defines the complete strategy to make it completely transformational. So thinking a little bit about that, we should think a little bit about the adaptation included in this long-term strategy, together with mitigating when we have the resilient climate development. We can have we can see adaptation and mitigation separately. When we think about emissions reduction scenarios, we need to be integrated at the same time the adaptation. And today, even though we have many methodologies to do it, there is not a lot of experience in that, and maybe it's an interesting issue to work on in this space. And here we could add something else. Well, I'll leave it for a later stage.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I think I can actually relate with the inputs I had seen and the updates from some of the sessions on linkages to the long-term strategies. And I think we take that feedback as well, importantly here. One thing that we didn't also indicate is that when we apply this systems approach or systems thinking, you always have to peg it against a long-term goal that you have to think about. But I think we have to make that to become very clear. And then you do your backcasting to see how you can lead to that. And that's going to define a lot of pathways that you need to take depending on your context and the situation. But I think it's a very important element that you are raising there. I know that some other people are as well engaged in the discussions on the global goal on adaptation, which is going to also help backwards in terms of how countries frame their long-term goals in adapting, which can maybe also help to continue to fine-tune that space. But the issue of linking, having that long-term perspective is something that will add as well into this as we continue to develop the systems approach, systems thinking in integrative approaches in adaptation. There were sessions, there were considerations on water. There was an interesting keynote as well that talked about decentralized connected systems and how these require infrastructure and technologies at different scales, different dimensions, digitally and social, physical and natural infrastructure. And the issue of recognizing that actually decentralized water systems perhaps would lead us into a better or more resilient systems in the future. Also, there were sessions that touched on integrated water resources management. But also the other interesting part as well was the fact that everything is connected to water. So integrating water-related actions in other issues or systems. You can't produce food without water, and we can't wear even the clothes we are wearing without water. So water is central to everything. So this integrative approach is also continues to become an important factor, that as we do adaptation, everything is interlinked. So these interlinkages, to make them in a conscious way, is a critical issue that we need to continue to build upon as we build our knowledge base. On agriculture and food systems, there was the emphasis, I think I lost my slide, but it will come in a second. Oops, okay, we can go back there. Yeah. On agriculture and food systems, some of the important things, as I did indicate at the beginning, is the technologies that are required to transform food production is not only new technologies or the big technologies in the way that we see them as high-tech. Some of the technologies, we already have them or we had them before. And some of the technology also is how to best use the technology, not just to get the technology for the sake of you think you don't have it, but also how do you best apply the technology you have at hand. And Dr. Mbo presented a lot of options on how to scale up resilience in food systems, and which actually brought a lot of thinking and inspiration in terms of how we can do building on the knowledge systems and the species that are actually some of them neglected species or forgotten species, and tapping into forgotten water resources. And then the digital services in agriculture, that we got the keynote yesterday on how on how they are already being applied in empowering farmers to respond to climate variability. The issue of collaboration, engagement of multiple stakeholders, and ownership were also strongly articulated. In terms of the collaborations we know here in the Latin American region, there's the PLACA that was also mentioned in terms of the experiences, but also FAO at a global scale with a few countries. They are also implementing a program on Scala, FAO and UNDP, of course, and GEO through the GEODLAM program as well. Does a lot of work on crop monitors that helps countries or farmers in how to best understand the risks and the application of information communication technologies. So are there any inspirations that came, or at least any initiatives that are coming out of here that we can expect to start already, or that have already started? Okay, we are getting to the close. Another important aspect was actually nature-based solutions are crucial to advance climate change adaptation in all fronts. There are fewer bullets here, but there's more to nature-based solutions than we see here. Actually, last year, is it last year? 2020, when was 2021? Is it last year or 2 years ago? This COVID has disoriented some of our psychological calendars. In 2021, under the UNFCCC, actually, there was a lot of conversation on land. And one of the observations is that actually building natural resilience or resilience of the natural ecosystems is one of the key fundamental ways on how we're going to get to true transformation and resilient systems. The Great Green Wall on Africa and the Sahel is based on actually land restoration practices a lot more strongly on that, building the resilience of the natural ecosystem itself to be able to again come back and provide services. So ecosystem-based services or protection of biodiversity fuels everything else. And also even in this particular case, what we were looking at for this particular region and other countries as well is how it supports other sectors and industries such as ecotourism. And I think there's a lot of positive practices like ecosystem integrity, prioritizing native species and landscape approaches. So this was also shared here at the Expo. On measuring adaptation to effectively direct actions and support, monitoring and evaluation supports effective adaptation options and how to best implement them. And I'm glad that we are already starting to look at how do we apply M&E in a way that informs how we implement or what we implement in order to achieve the outcomes. And I think it links back to the issue of the long-term perspective that we have. Because the M&E, you always have to measure it against the long-term perspective. What did we intend or what are we intending to achieve? Are we really moving in that direction? And if we set M&E frameworks for us towards that direction, then it becomes even much more helpful. And these are some of the conversations that also came in terms of how the ML is continuing to improve and inform how we do things better. The issue of engaging stakeholders was also very important here, and the two important stakeholders, or the critical important stakeholders we spoke about, there was the private sector, that on how we can think and frame about it in adaptation. And I think we have to make sure that we understand what we mean when we say engagement of the private sector in adaptation, because I know that there are so many different understandings. There's only one correct understanding. And this is actually understanding what makes the private sector in the developing countries or in smaller economies, and what do you mean when you want to empower and promote that to effectively engage and build that base or the absorptive base that would help you. And then there is we had good engagement of youth. Earlier on, I talked about technologies, which we talked about disruption. And I think when I think of technology, when I think of disruption, sometimes technology requires systems that are fearless, people that don't have too many constraints, and that's where the space of creative minds come into play to help us push the boundaries on the things that we're not thinking today. So the role of youth as well in adaptation was actually emphasized quite strongly, and there was a very interesting session yesterday. And the issue of making sure that for inclusivity to become possible and effective, we need the right instruments, so the right legal frameworks, the right rules that would enable everybody to participate, flexible models, especially for the private sector, access to projects that everybody has access to the space, the operating space, collaboration between the government as well as the private sector and the communities to help to make sure that that collaboration, that space happens, and this enables the participation of everybody. And there are many initiatives. As I mentioned, the Adaptation Committee from our side continues to work and promote work with the private sector. We had good conversations also on what we are doing, what is happening under the Race to Resilience, which actually promotes a lot of innovations and big transformations that are achieved by getting the big players in the game to help public entities to actually drive the action together. But not only that, but also to drive the space in themselves. I always make an example that if paracetamol was to run out in the market, even though it's handled by a pharmaceutical industry and the government has nothing to do with paracetamol, if it runs out tomorrow, it's a government problem. So there's always this collaboration that's needed, because people go to the government and say there's no paracetamol in the market. They will not go to the pharmaceuticals. And so the collaboration is key. And to the leg, we are running a multi-stakeholder subgroup as well there that seeks to get the minds of people that can help to hone the thinking on how we can best do this. So this is just a quick reflection on how the week went, and we hope to see this conversation continuing. As I was introducing at the beginning, we do not see this as the end, but we are seeing this as the beginning of our conversation. We are going to share contacts of everybody, and I'm hoping that we will continue to talk together, and I'm hoping to see all of you at the next NAP Expo next year, somewhere where it will happen. So thank you very much. I forgot I'm moderating for myself. This is now the end of the formal happenings, or the technical happenings of the NAP Expo. If you had any question, then this was the last moment to ask. But otherwise, we're going to transition now and hand over to the government of Chile to do the closing. But I saw that then there's just one question before, two questions before we hand over to the government of Chile. So, Colonel, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mutsomi, and thanks for these excellent synthesis. But I just want to highlight one thing that I think it's of paramount importance when it comes to adaptation to climate change. I remember that some presentation touch upon the issue of climate justice or environmental justice. So I think when we look at the resources, even whether it's water resources or food system, I think we have to put, and as many presenters say, so we have to put people first. And this issue of climate justice is really important. So we have to also consider water insecurity or food insecurity from this perspective. Consider them as a issue of climate justice or environmental justice, where we need to have a people-centered approach. At the end of the day, I think it's a matter of human rights. So we cannot address the issue of adaptation without referring to this issue of climate justice or environmental justice. And also, this is going to determine the way that we are approaching the issue of finance, how we have to close this financial gap and also this adaptation gap. So climate justice, environmental justice need to be at the center of all adaptation initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colonel, for that important reflection. I see that we have another comment or words of congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm Claude Frank and retired from Rwanda. Thank the organizers of the NAP Expo 2023 in Chile. But my reflection will actually come to when it comes of adaptation, we need to think of adaptation approaches as in post-harvest process intervention that we normally encounter in the African countries. Most of the cases you see that our harvests are actually, we lose them during harvesting. And then in the end, what comes out, we need to be adaptive under what circumstances, yet you can't even being adaptive on one's farmland. So we need to think of maybe, I don't know which approaches will be used, but that needs to be actually reflected in the outcomes of what you've been presenting. So as to actually we move in our mind and then back to our countries, what best adaptive methodologies or approaches can we embed that actually is communicating to what is on the ground. Lastly, you find people, we are planning of management of integrated water resource management, but of a surprise you find maybe say ministries and governments are planning of making irrigation on thousands of hectares, but of which in reality they don't base on the availability of water capacity within that country. So we need to base on the reality as per the country's context. And then if we know that, then we need to actually adapt to what is available and then do what is possible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for those important comments that continue to close the picture we have to look at the complete food system as a whole, from production all the way to waste, to disposal. One more. Yes, of course.
Thank you very much. My name is Alvaro Rojas. I work for UNUHS and MCII in Bonn. First, I would like to thank the Secretariat and everybody that organized this event. I think it provides an amazing opportunity to better understand the challenges and opportunities that are out there to formulate NAPs. And I hope this informs all negotiations on adaptations. It is a very good example of what is happening out there and what still needs to happen. So thanks so much for that. And then just a quick comment on the pathways. I think, while on the one hand, I very much agree that these are very concrete fields or directions in which we are already making very important progress and more needs to happen. All of them are interconnected. So keep this mentality that this is maybe silo events or silo directions in which we need to move is something that we need to work on. And while I think that we all understand that being explicit about the interconnection of them is very important. Yesterday we had a session on enabling environments, and a conclusion there was that finance is fed by analytics, and analytics depends on technology, and everything is connected with governance, and all these topics are very interconnected and interrelated, and I think it would be very good to reflect that. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that final reflection. I actually wish the COP can mandate the negotiations on adaptation to happen in the NAP Expo. Then we will have more fun, right? Oh, there's one more last one. Okay, one very last, and then I want to hand over to the government of Chile. Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I'm going to speak in Spanish to facilitate this and make this quicker. Is that better? I wanted to express regarding the constitution of practice communities around the world, considering that in this map we addressed separately paths 5, 6, and 7. 5 and 6 referred to water and agriculture, and 7 nature-based solutions. I think it would be very positive, on the one hand, connect the approach based on ecosystems with the approach of water, because the use of soil and conservation of ecosystems has a very important impact. And this doesn't mean that we need to step aside from the importance of technological development and the possibilities of improving production systems. But maybe we should strengthen or give more identity to ecosystem-based solutions to manage these resources that have had some sort of participation in certain sessions, but not so much as whatever that was referred to technology or incorporation of technology in the food sector and water management sector. And in this way, and coinciding with the fact that innovation is very important, I would like to highlight something that some of our colleagues have also stressed throughout several sessions, and that is also aligns with what you said a few minutes ago regarding climate justice. That besides the private sector, that should have a very powerful role to what communities should have, and also have a place for traditional and ancient and originary people's knowledge as local knowledge of people that actually know how the ecosystems where they live and work. And it would be very interesting in next sessions to explore tools beyond, not just to involve the private sector, particularly companies, but also to civil society, so that they can have a more active role in the application and the formulation of adaptation measures, either short-term or long-term, precisely with this climate justice perspective. And that this attraction of funding, international funding and national funding, or from the private sector, doesn't replace the focus on improving people's lives, and then they should be leading the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those reflections, and I think the interconnectedness of these issues, the pathways was emphasized also by our colleague from UNU. I think that's very important, and thank you for that important feedback. We'll take this into account as we go back and digest this further and continue to engage with you as we continue along. So this is not the first time you'll hear from us or from me or from the team. You will continue to hear from us as we move along in this journey together. Thank you very much. All right. It's me again, sorry. No, but we have now come to the important moment of the event, which is the closing of the event, and we are honored to have with us the representative of the government of Chile, who are going to offer closing remarks and make sure that in the same way that they have welcomed us here, that they are able to accompany us as we go back to our usual routines. So we'll have reflections. First of all, I'll say a few words of thanks. There are so many people we need to recognize in pulling up this event, and then the lecturer will make a few remarks, and from there we will have the government of Chile, Mr. Julio Cordana, who will make reflections from there. On our side as the Secretariat, I wish to deeply, first of all, thank everyone, but I want to start first with our colleagues from the government of Chile for the seamless support to us in organizing this important event here. Julio, we sincerely thank through you to the government for making all the arrangements possible. It was amazing. This was one of the easy events. We organized it within a very short time. We had to process visas. I know that every one of you were actually worried, but the government of Chile did a fantastic job. No government has done it in this way before. I've worked with so many governments, but it was very smooth. We sincerely appreciate that. And the fact that everybody is here and we're enjoying the beautiful city of Santiago. Thank you very much, Julio. And I also want to thank colleagues. I will mention some names, but please, I know I will forget some. Gladys, that's been very wonderful working with our team. We are in Bonn, so our time zones you can understand. So we have to work literally throughout the clock, working with the team here, with Emily, with Lorena, and Gonzalo. Yeah, I see Gonzalo over there. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. I feel like you're now my colleagues. I think we should go back to Bonn together. Yeah, thank you so much. It has been rewarding. And I also want to thank our colleagues from the hotel, from the Best Western. I know that we bombarded them with a huge crowd that just came here when we made demands, and from us in the Secretariat, our demands can sometimes be a little bit stressful. And I want to thank Neil and the team at the hotel as a whole for being so patient with us and keeping us organized. I also want to thank indeed some of the work that goes very well behind that we don't recognize. Our technicians, thank you very much. In this room and in the other rooms, you did a fantastic job to make sure that our job is as productive as possible. Thank you so much for that, and we look forward to your continued support in this. And our interpreters, wonderful job. Many of the participants were so happy that they could comfortably speak from their own languages, and we sincerely appreciate your facilitation to that. And we have many other people that have helped us make sure that the materials here in this place are in order. And now, last of course, but not least, I want to deeply thank our keynote speakers. I think that we need to give them a very good round of applause. And indeed, all of you, and the organizations in particular, for supporting us, responding to our calls when we needed your support, and you did so. And all the participants, without all of you, we wouldn't have this event. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Musumi, for that. I think this is a mixed feeling. For some of us, we're happy going back. I think then for some others, I think there are some parting ways with friends that we've made, I think, over the several years doing negotiation room in here. So before I also try to join Musumi to say thanks, I just want to reflect on one thing that forward looking, I think when we were here, we saw, I think, how climate change is affecting the LDC countries and others. And it's my hope that I think lessons learned here is some of these things we'll take in the negotiation room, because it's like when they get to the negotiation room, things changed. But now I think this has happened to be a kind of engagement that is going to serve as a long-lasting thought for some of us, even when negotiating. We know that when we negotiate most of the adaptation other issues we have, of course, our country at the forefront, but it's also for us to note the reality that indeed climate change is happening, it's affecting the LDC, and it's time for us to take urgent actions. So with that, I want to start first, Julio, and to your team. Thank you very much for the LEG team, at least, for hosting us. For some of us, it's our first time to be in Chile. I took like 2 to 3 days to be here, but it's rewarding. When I saw my ticket, I had a mixed feeling, Musomi, honestly. But at least we are here, and I think we've made the useful impact of what we are here for the meeting. So thank you very much, and then thanks to your team. And I also want to join Musomi, I think, to thank the keynote speakers, because they tried to provoke a lot of thoughts that even helped to serve as input to most of the prior events. So I hope from the leg is that at least we'll try the space that we provided throughout this NAP Expo. At least we help to add to our knowledge, because we've shared knowledge over, I think, the past days. And also that these experiences, we also try to take them into actions. It's not for us to get these experiences and they'll get back. Except otherwise, then when you come back, we'll just start repeating the same thing. So I hope that you put also these good practices into actions, and also making sure that we try to reduce the vulnerability of our different countries. So on this note also, I also want to use this opportunity to appreciate, of course, the role played by the moderators and the rapporteur. I think it's quite complex. I remember, you have prior sessions that ends, and then you have like 2 minutes to put together some reflection notes. So thank you very much. I think they deserve a round of applause, please. Yeah, thank you very much. And also, I would like to take this, of course, opportunity to thank countries that are here, at least that are here to witness this NAP Expo, and also to thank our colleague members from the different constituted bodies, and also the UN agencies and organizations, research, and also other institutions that are here that have played, of course, a very vital role for this NAP Expo. When we are passing through the corridor, I saw some amounts of, high amounts of bilaterals going on, and that was even affecting some of the session. Thank you very much. And also, Motsumi, I think please allow me, with courtesy, to say thanks to you, Motsumi, the team lead, and also the other members from the Secretariat that made this NAP Expo happen. Thank you very much, Motsumi, for that. So before I exit the stage, I also want to recognize the presence of LEG members that are here. I think we are a total of 17. We have about 10 LEG members that are here. I don't want to miss them. So the first, I want to appreciate Hannah from Sudan. Is Hannah here? Okay. And then also Kenel from Haiti. I took over from Kenel as the chairperson of the LEG recently, I think, in Comoros. And also France from Lesotho. I think it's good for us to know the LEG members that are here. And our colleague from Canada, Dominic. And also John from South Sudan. Mary from Togo. Of course, Idrissa from Burkina Faso. Benon from Malawi. And also Budi from Nepal. So, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a hope that we'll take, of course, there have been so many new incubation of ideas. So it's a hope that we can put this into practice, at least in making sure, because from the LEG, our mandate is to see that countries formulate and implement their NAPs, at least for us to reduce vulnerability in different countries. So on this note, I want to end here and wish you all a safe flight back home. And for those that are staying here, I wish you success in all your undertakings. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for that, and there's been so many thank yous that I don't have much more to say, but I do want to join everyone, Motsomi and the chair of the leg, to thank everyone for being here. You know how the life of a Chilean is now, how far we are from the world, and the long hours that it takes us to get anywhere. And that's the way it is for us. But of course, it's because of that we really appreciate that everybody's here, that everybody made it to this meeting, and that we had a very successful NAP Expo here in Santiago. So I also want to thank in particular my team, Gonzalo, who is over there, sitting in the back, and of course Lorena, which is there, and Emily, sitting there together. Most of the problems that were here in order to organize this meeting were solved by these three people. And also Gladys, who is somewhere here. Gladys, that is also, I could say, part of our team, if I can say that. But really, as you can see, it's a small team, but very dedicated, very committed, and really putting everything on our part to make it a successful meeting. And the reason why, why we are so committed to this meeting is that that adaptation is something that it is here. It's not going to go away. Climate change is here, and the last report of the IPCC makes it very clear. Adaptation is not an option anymore, and therefore communities of practice, people that are dedicated to this, to develop policies, to make sure that the most vulnerable are protected, really are going to make a difference in the next years and decades in a world that is heating up, in a world that is not abandoning fossil fuels at the speed that we need to do it, and therefore this group here, these people here, that we people here that we are dealing with this issue are making playing a very important role for the future of humanity, really, of how we adapt to the world that we have created, that this generation, the previous generations have created. And therefore, I think this event is particularly important from that point of view. We need to be very practical. We need to be very pragmatic. We need to go down to the roots of the impacts of climate change. And this is why I think it's so important that to hear from a number of speakers and a number of interventions and questions. How do we make it real? How to make a difference for the people at the grassroots level? And that is a challenge for us as well. That is a challenge for all governments. That is a challenge for everybody that is sitting here. And I was just a few minutes ago, I was looking at the last report of the Adaptation Fund meeting that was meeting these days. And if you see the projects that were approved and were funded, most of them are related to food security. They are related to ecosystem-based solutions. They are related to local communities, to livelihoods. And the reason why when we prepare a project and we say, well, what's the most important and highest priority project that we can present to the Adaptation Fund? We all go to these topics that relate to the livelihoods, that relate to daily lives, that make a difference to people that are dealing to this. And there's loss and damage discussion. There's a finance discussion about adaptation. There are so many things that need to be discussed at the COP. But I think the NAP Expo is a unique opportunity really to say, there's this opportunity, there is this discussion, there is these pathways that have been discussed in Santiago this year, and later on, next year will be another country, another city that will see this debate happen. So what I would suggest is that maybe we can organize an event, the Secretariat, the LEG, and Chile, and we would be very happy to try to bring this event to a wider audience that is present at the COP, and maybe not only discuss about the conclusions and the takeaways from this meeting, but also about how we make the NAP Expo more consequential, more influential in the way that we are efficient in our adaptation policies. So there you go. I said it. I proposed it. So I hope that's something that we will pick up together and make it maybe happen when the COP comes. So again, thank you very, very much. I think this is. I'm sorry it took it a little longer, but I really wanted to share some reflections from Chile. Again, very, very happy for all of you that made it here. And of course, now that the meeting will be coming to an end, it is only my duty to say, enjoy the city. If you are able to go around the city or outside of the city, please do so. There are very interesting places around Santiago and outside of the city. So, and after that, of course, very safe travels. And I really hope that we will see each other again. Thank you very much.
There's a proposal to have a family photo. If everybody agrees. Okay. But before that, I realized, I was telling Julio I forgot to mention one important aspect, and I sincerely apologize. I forgot to thank our colleagues from the UNDP Chile. Without them,